What's up guys, Ryan here from Mudgunner, and today we are going to talk about tax stamps and when should you notify or give the ATF, NFA branch specifically, a call about your tax stamp if you don't have it back yet. Well, the answer is you can call them whenever you want, but that doesn't necessarily mean it's going to be very helpful, and honestly it's kind of annoying because I waited on hold for 55 minutes today. But I'm going to tell you why I called them. So, when have I ever called the ATF or the NFA branch again specifically? So you have the ATF and then you have the National Firearms Act division of the ATF, which is NFA items such as suppressors, short barrel rifles, machine guns, that type of stuff. Anything that requires a tax stamp, you would call the NFA division. So I have called twice now. Today was my second time, and the first time was a few years ago. So the first time I called was because I was waiting on this guy, and I was waiting for the tax stamp from the person our store bought it from to be approved to the store. So when someone sells an NFA item to a dealer, it's a Form 3. And once that Form 3 is approved, then the store can sell it to someone else and then it's a Form 4. So NFA stuff is a little weird, but yeah, this is a Serbu Super Shorty. It's a AOW, which is any other weapon. So it's not a short barrel shotgun because it doesn't have a stock. A shotgun has a stock. It is classified as an any other weapon because it fires 12 gauge, so it's not a pistol, but it's not a shotgun, or legally a shotgun, I guess, because it doesn't have a stock. So it classifies as AOW, which is a $5 tax stamp, which is pretty nice because $5 is way better than $200. But basically what happened was our store bought this from an individual, this is years ago, and I was going to buy it. I already had a deal worked out with my boss and everything, and I waited about a year and a half, and that Form 3 never cleared to the store. Now, right now, that would sound like a lot. I mean, it was a lot back then too, but back then I would say a lot of Form 3s were clearing in about 6 to 8 months, but it varies. Sometimes they're faster, sometimes they're longer. And we didn't do very many Form 3s at that point where we bought NFA items from people, so yeah, I waited about a year and a half, and then I'm like, you know what, I'm just going to call them. And I'm glad I did, because when I called them, they said, that tax stamp cleared over a year ago. And I was pretty sad. I'm very patient, so like my emotions are not like crazy. I'm not like overly dramatic. So I was bummed more than sad, but I was like, dang, I could have had this thing a long time ago. So yeah, I called them. They said that tax stamp cleared over a year ago. I was like, okay, well then what happens, because we don't have it. The item's in our store because we were holding it. It's kind of weird how it works, but especially with stores. So we did it as kind of just like we held the NFA item for paperwork to clear because the person didn't want it. The story was someone passed away, and I believe it was their wife or whatnot that sold this to us. So they didn't want it, and us as a store, again, it gets kind of weird. Every store might handle it differently. Every ATF agent you talk to might handle it differently, but this worked for us back then. And when I talked to ATF on the phone, they said, okay, no problem. We'll just send you a certified copy of the tax stamp. So that came in maybe a week or two later, and then I was allowed to get started on the Form 4, which is the store selling it to me. And that, at the time, it was mail-in, so the kiosk wasn't a thing, e-file wasn't a thing. If you know what any of this means, I can talk about it a little bit, but I'm assuming you guys already know about tax stamp stuff. So yeah, all Form 4s at that time were mail-in, and that means you had to get fingerprints done, like actual cards, 2 cards. You had to get actual passport photos done, and then you had to fill out the forms basically by hand and send them in. I was used to that, and that's how I got a lot of my NFA items. So that back in my day, that's basically what it is. But yeah, so I did that, and it only took 4 months to get approved, which was my fastest tax stamp time at the time. And I thought maybe it was just fast because it was an AOW, it wasn't a $200 tax stamp. Because at that time, most of my $200 tax stamps, so short barrel rifles or suppressors, were taking about 6 months. And I would say my tax stamps have always gone a little bit faster than other people's. I bought my first suppressor in 2018. I was 21 at the time, or maybe 22. So yeah, it was 2018 when I started buying NFA items, to give you any sort of reference, but I've never had a tax stamp take longer than 10 months. But most of mine average about 6. This one took 4, so I was pretty happy about that. But it basically took 4 plus the year and a half I waited just for our store to get the tax stamp. So it wasn't fast. It felt like forever, but the 4 months was nice. So I called the ATF specifically about that one because it took so long for our store to get it. And yeah, that was the first time I called them. Now, the reason why I called them today was, if you guys have been watching my channel, I've been talking about the suppressor for this gun for a minute. This is a Knights Armament SR-25 that was made in 1993. And this gun so happens to come with a suppressor also from 1993, and it's the serial number matching suppressor. So I am pretty excited more about this one than almost any gun I own, because this is a pretty rare find. It's an expensive gun, and I would really like the suppressor to go with it. So I don't have the suppressor. The person I bought this from is holding on to it because that's how it's supposed to be done. And yeah, we submitted the paperwork back in November, and when you're buying a private party NFA deal, it's complicated. It's doable, but it's complicated. I can't help every private NFA deal. I've helped a lot of people with questions, but the gist of it is you have to manually fill out Form 4s. So instead of a store doing it for you, like through a kiosk or e-file or anything like that, you have to handwrite the Form 4, which is the tax stamp, and you write the seller, so whoever's selling it to you, as the transferor, and then your information as the transferee because it's being transferred to you. So once you have all that information down, I mean, it's kind of like the questions on there are just the normal tax stamp questions, or they're basically the same questions on a 4473. So I can't answer on how you guys fill it out, but as long as you read the boxes, it kind of tells you everything. But you'll send 2 copies to the ATF, their copy that they keep, and then the copy they send back to you. And then 1 copy gets sent to your local sheriff's office. That's how it's always been for tax stamps. So sheriff gets a copy, ATF gets 2 copies, but they send 1 back to you. That's your approved tax stamp. So yeah, we mailed these out back in November, and I mailed them out. So we hand wrote all the forms. I went and got fingerprint cards done. I went and got passport photos done. And we're basically doing it the old way, which was the normal way. So I'm used to that stuff. It doesn't bother me. But with stuff like this, again, it's private to private. There's no store involved at all. So he holds onto the item, and then I'm just waiting for their call because the person that's selling it is the one that gets the tax stamp back, not me. So once they get the tax stamp, as long as you trust them, they call you and be like, hey, your tax stamp is here. You can come pick up the suppressor or whatever you bought now. And yeah, I did that back in November. And my last private deal took 3 months. And that was for this from a buddy of mine. So I bought this the same way, private deal, no issues. I've done a few of them now. So it's not a pain to me, but there's some weird quirks that I've had happen. So yeah, this one took 3 months to clear last year, which was nice. This is my Silencer Co. Maxim 9. And yeah, no issues with that one. My buddy texted me, he's like, hey, I got your stamp. I'm like, already? Because at the time, he got this to me in 3 months, I was waiting on this one. And I was waiting on this one for like 6 or 7 months. This is a Silencer Co. Sparrow, and I bought this privately. But this deal was weird because the guy had to leave. He had to move out of the country. So the way we did this was we kind of did it through our store, but it's a weird way because the guy's like, I physically can't own the suppressor. I'm moving to Mexico. Yeah, I just need it gone. But our store couldn't buy it because our store has to pay a $200 tax stamp just to buy it from the person and then charge a $200, well, the ATF charges the $200 tax stamp once we sell it. So anytime an NFA item is transferred, it doesn't matter how many times it's transferred, there's always that $200 tax stamp paid, unless it's a AOW like this. So yeah, what's weird with this is it's not worth it for the store to pay a $200 tax stamp to buy this because it's brand new. These are like, I think $300 or $400, so it doesn't really leave the store any money to sell it. So I worked out a deal where I bought it from the guy. I paid $50 because I didn't know the guy at all. Killer deal on a suppressor, but it was kind of a weird deal because I paid $50. Our store held it as kind of like a courtesy transfer in a way, but the paperwork was still from the person to me, and the store held it, and he was, again, going to get the tax stamp and then let me know when he got it. But he says he has a P.O. box here, a post office box, that it would get sent to because, again, he's moving to Mexico. And he says he has someone check that regularly and he'll forward me the tax stamp. Well, 6 or 7 months later, I still don't have the tax stamp. I tried calling him. He doesn't answer. So the suppressor is basically sitting in limbo at our store. And that's where these private deals can get tricky. I didn't know the guy. It was a weird deal. And he just randomly came in our store one day and I just gave him $50 that I had in my pocket. So price for the suppressor, great. That puts me into it for $250 because it's $50 for this plus $200 tax stamp. The suppressor, brand new, I think is like $400-ish. So it was a killer deal, but it's just a weird deal. And one day I just checked my mail at my house, and what's crazy is suppressor tax stamps, they normally ship in like a square envelope like this. I'm probably making a stupid square or rectangle. But the envelope I had was just a traditional envelope. I don't know the exact length of them, but a normal size envelope. It said Department of Justice on it. I'm like, that's weird. I don't know why they'd be sending me anything. But then I was like, maybe it's the tax stamp. And I opened it, and it was the tax stamp. And there was a note that says could not be delivered. And basically they tried to deliver it to him from probably his P.O. box. Didn't get delivered. Got sent back to the ATF. And then they're like, well, we'll just send it to me. So That one was weird, and then I picked up my can from the store. But again, there was no paperwork from the store because they were just kind of holding it in limbo. But that's where it gets weird with these NFA items because you're kind of tied to them, but then what happens if you move out of the country? That guy just needed it gone. He was like probably a 60 or 70-year-old man. He bought the suppressor like 10 years ago, never shot it. So yeah, I mean, for me, it ended up working out. I'm into this for like $250, but it's still a weird deal. And if you don't have a store to go through, I mean, the person is supposed to hold on to the NFA item until the tax stamp gets approved to you. So that's where it gets tricky. But obviously, this guy could not physically hold on to the suppressor because he's leaving the country. So yeah, weird deal on that one. Yeah, so this is kind of just story time and talking NFA stories because I know there's some weird ones out there. I'm also going to say a couple other about stores because there's some weird ones about that. But basically with this, I called today because I'm like, well, it's been like 7 months and normally my private NFA deals have gone through faster. Because that was the other thing. This got approved in like 4 months, but then it took like 2 or 3 months of limbo between going back to them and getting to me. So that was the weird thing with this. But again, this one from my buddy, like my friend that I actually know, he texted me 3 months later. He's like, hey, I got your stamp. I was like, yes, that's awesome. So yeah, that one worked out. This one, I called ATF today. Again, I was on hold for about 55 minutes. It also took them a minute to figure out what I was talking about because the serial number for this, it's so old that there's been overlap of other brands that have this serial number because the gun and the suppressor have the exact same serial number. It's just a 20,000 digit serial number, but they didn't actually make 20,000 of them. It's just whatever they started with. I think it's serial number 70 on the can, and the gun is serial number 70. So again, these are, the Knight's Armament was made in 1993. The gun and the suppressor have the exact same serial number. So that's where it gets weird if they overlap. But I called the ATF. They said that serial number doesn't even show that it's going to you. I'm like, well, for what suppressor is it? And they said a 9mm. I'm like, okay, we're not talking about the same thing then, because this is a 7.62 suppressor. So I had to tell them the caliber and then the length. It's a 16-inch suppressor. It's going to go like all the way out here. So I told him the caliber, the length, and then roughly when I submitted it, and he was able to find it, and he's like, that was approved on May 20th. And I was like, bummer, because I don't have it. I've never been texted about it. And then I talked to them. I was like, okay, so what's the plan? Because the person still has a suppressor. Because he said that if 45 days goes by from approval date, he can submit for a certified copy. I was like, can I submit for the certified copy? And the NFA ATF agent said no. It has to be the person that's holding on to the suppressor right now. And this person that I bought this from, he's a very nice man, older gentleman, but I don't have any bad vibes from him. At the time when I bought the suppressor in this, I paid him for everything. Obviously, I left with the gun because it's not an NFA item. So left with the gun, and then it's just basically goodwill that I will get the suppressor when he gets the tax stamp. Called him today. He answers no problem anytime I've ever talked to him. I hit him up like a couple months ago, like, hey, any update? He's like, not yet. And he shops at our store occasionally, so I've seen him at the store twice since we did this deal. And yeah, I called him today. He said, I'm really sorry for the inconvenience. I promise I haven't seen it. He went to his post office box just to check. He's like, it's not there. And I asked them to keep an eye out for it. He says, if the next 15 days goes by, because we're about 30 days in, he says, on July 5th, if I don't have it, I will call the NFA branch and try to get that certified copy so we can get you your suppressor. So that's kind of where I'm at with this, but it's good to know that it was actually approved. It just sucks that it was approved a month ago and we still don't have it for this. But that's kind of my story time. When should you call the ATF? Well, I'm patient. I wouldn't call them a month or 2 months into the wait. It's just not worth it. With these e-file ones, I mean, they're supposed to clear within a week or so. I mean, maybe call at the 3-month mark and then the 6-month mark. You could call whenever you want. This is just my recommendation. But for me, I was like, well, it's just over 6 months because, again, I submitted it in June, or not June, it is June. I submitted it in November. I was like, I'm going to just call them, see where it's at. And then I also checked on the status from one that I papered back in April that was also a private party deal from my same buddy that sold me this because I'm waiting on a short barrel rifle right now, and it's going to be pretty sick. But yeah, I papered that in April. They said that one's still pending, but they said the suppressor for this is approved. So that's where I'm at. Wanted to give you guys an update. And then I also want to talk about this because I've heard this over the years, and it's pretty bad business practice. But let's say you buy an NFA item from a dealer, like a small time dealer. Like our store is pretty big. We have the Silencer Shop kiosk. A lot of these smaller time dealers are not going to have that kiosk. That's like thousands of dollars to get in your store. So let's say they don't have a kiosk. That means you might have to do like actual fingerprint cards, mail it out and all that stuff. What I've seen or heard of, a lot of people will give the dealer all the fingerprint cards, give them $200 in cash and trust that they're going to send it. Well, I think that's a bad idea because I've heard so many stories of it. A year goes by, 2 years goes by, and they haven't heard anything. So that is not the way I would do it. If I was buying from a dealer, like a small-time dealer that doesn't do anything electronically, I would fill out all the fingerprint stuff, fill out the form. They should hopefully know how to fill out the NFA form if they're selling NFA items, but I would have you send it out versus them. There's no reason why they need to be the one to send it out. Let's say let's say that's how they do it and they have to send it out themselves. Well, don't pay $200 cash. Put your credit card on the form. You used to not be able to pay for tax stamps with credit cards. It had to be a certified money order. And I think that's why these people give the dealers the $200 cash in the promise that they're going to send that $200 money order, but then you have no way to track that. Whereas if on the tax stamp, it gives you the option to put a credit card number. If you put your credit card number on that tax stamp, then you know when the ATF charges you. So for the suppressor for this, I knew exactly when the ATF charged me. They charged me back in November. So I know it at least got to them, but that's what I've been waiting on is the return. So you wouldn't necessarily know when it gets returned to the dealer because you're relying on the dealer to call you, but you could do what I did, and let's say 6 months goes by, you just call the ATF and they're like, that got approved a month ago. Well, then it would come into an issue with the dealer because the dealer is licensed to sell firearms. Then you could bring that up with the ATF, like the local ATF agency, be like, hey, my tax stamp's approved, but they're not giving me my suppressor. Then the ATF gets involved in that. They can't really get involved with this. I mean, unless the guy was maybe like preventing me from getting it. But if you're buying it from a dealer, I would say you should pay by credit card so you can at least see when the ATF takes the money out. Because it'll say clear as day. I don't know what it says in the bank statements, but it says ATF or something like that. It's a government entity that draws that $200 from you. So you'll at least have transaction that it went through versus just giving a dealer $200 and hoping they send it out, because a lot of dealers have not sent it out over the years, and then they go out of business, and that's happened a lot. Like we've had to resubmit tax stamps for people that had their items go from a dealer to us because the dealer went out of business, but they never submitted their tax stamps, even though a year or so prior to that they said, oh yeah, we'll send out your tax stamp. They just never did. So just because someone is an FFL or a dealer does not mean that they are ethical, and yeah, sometimes they have stolen people's money. But yeah, that's just my recommendation. I work for a gun store, and I would say we are an honest store. We have the kiosk, so anything tax stamp wise, it's clear as day. It's all through the kiosk, and it makes it very simple. But again, if you're buying, and there's cool NFA items that those small time dealers might have that don't have a kiosk, so if you're buying it from them, I highly recommend at least paying that credit card option on the tax stamp so that you know when the ATF draws the money. So whether you send out the paperwork or the dealer sends out the paperwork, I would at least do that so you at least have a record. So that's kind of my rant for today. Hopefully it helps some of you guys. I'm sorry for anyone that's ever gotten screwed on NFA deals. I'm sure it really sucks. I don't feel like I've gotten screwed yet. I've just had these weird deals, but yeah, I know that could be really shitty, and that I would be really upset if it was me. So I would say listen to my advice for this because I've been doing it for a while and I've seen a lot of people get screwed. But yeah, other than that, thank you guys for watching. Stay tuned for my next video. And we got the viewer builds video going up tomorrow, so go check that out. It's going to be a lot of fun. Thank you guys for watching.